What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 3 sleepers and studs. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and the top stud at each position. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 3, let's take a look at my sleepers and studs. Starting off at the quarterback position, my Week 3 stud is going to be Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Dak Prescott has averaged 30.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4 rush attempts per game. He scored 44 fantasy points last game, and he got 5 rush attempts. He's going to be about 10% owned, projected at 25.1 fantasy points here in Week 3. He's $7,200 FanDuel salary and $1,300 more on. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary and $1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 57 points scored in this game, and they have the Dallas Cowboys trailing by 5. So a super high-scoring game with a potential passing game script here if the Cowboys fall behind. And a fantastic matchup, checks all the boxes in fantasy players that we want to target. So I like Dak Prescott here versus the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, my Week 3 sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Derek Carr from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the New England Patriots, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've been middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Derek Carr has averaged 18.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 1.5 rush attempts per game. He scored 23 fantasy points last game off of 3 rush attempts, and he's only going to be about 1% owned. Now, he's only projected at 15.2 fantasy points here in Week 3. He is facing the Patriots defense, which is pretty good. And if he can put up a game and score 20 plus fantasy points, he's going to hit value or exceed his value because he's only $5,400 DraftKings salary and $1,400 more on FanDuel. So you're saving a lot of salary here at the quarterback position. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Las Vegas Raiders trailing by 5.5. So a nice passing game script for Derek Carr. I think this game is going to be closer than most people give it credit for. The Raiders have a really good team this year, so I like Derek Carr here versus the New England Patriots. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My Week 3 running back stud is going to be Derrick Henry from the Tennessee Titans playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Derrick Henry has averaged 13.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 28 rush attempts per game and 2.5 pass targets per game. He scored 8 and 19 fantasy points in the first 2 weeks off of 25 and 31 rush attempts. This guy is getting monster volume, so it's just a matter of time before he puts up a monster game. He's going to be about 14% owned. He's on the field for 73% of the snaps and touches the ball 58% of that time. He's projected at 17.9 fantasy points here in Week 3. He's $7,800 DraftKings salary and $400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, with the Tennessee Titans favored by 2.5. So a super high scoring game a competitive game, a great matchup. This guy's getting monster volume. I think he's going to hit big here in week 3. So I like Derrick Henry here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, my week 3 running back sleeper pick is Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Joe Mixon has only averaged 9.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 17.5 rush attempts per game with 3 pass targets per game. He scored 13 fantasy points last week off of 16 rush attempts and 4 pass targets. Now his ownership has come up here. It was down around 3% ownership, but now it's coming in at about 9% ownership. So not really the sleeper pick that I was originally looking for, but still relatively low owned here. And he's projected at 14.6 fantasy points here in week 3. No, he's on the field for 54% of the snaps, touches the ball 48% of that time, and he's $5,900 DraftKings salary and $1,100 more on FanDuel. So pretty low salary. He hasn't really put up a big game yet, but I think that's coming. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Bengals trailing by 4.5. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles haven't been great this year. The Bengals haven't been great either. So I think this game is going to be somewhat close, but Joe Mixon will get involved in the passing game if he needs to be. So I like Joe Mixon here versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My week 3 wide receiver stud is Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the 4th worst defense overall, and they've given up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Amari Cooper has averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11.5 pass targets per game. He scored 19 and 18 fantasy points in the first 2 weeks, getting 9 and 14 pass targets. He's going to be about 15% owned, on the field for 93% of the snaps, touches the ball 16% of that time, projected at 16.6 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $6,500 DraftKings salary and $500 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 57 points scored in this game, with the Dallas Cowboys trailing by 5. So you got that potential passing game script as the Dallas Cowboys may be playing from behind in this game, and a fantastic matchup here. So I like Amari Cooper here versus the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, my week 3 wide receiver sleeper pick is Corey Davis from the Tennessee Titans playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Corey Davis is averaging 16.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.5 pass targets per game. He scored 13 and 20 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 5 and 8 pass targets. He's on the field for 81% of the snaps, touching the ball 11% of that time. He's going to be about 1% owned here, so super low ownership, and he's $5,200 DraftKings salary and $100 more on FanDuel. projected at 12.4 fantasy points here in week 3. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, with the Tennessee Titans favored by 2.5. So high scoring game, competitive game, fantastic matchup. So I like Corey Davis here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My week 3 tight end stud is Zach Ertz from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing tight ends. Zach Ertz has averaged 10 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7 pass targets per game. He scored 9 and 11 fantasy points in the first 2 games, off of 7 pass targets in each of those games. He's going to be about 11% owned here. He's on the field for 90% of the snaps, touching the ball 11% of that time, projected at 12.9 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $5,100 DraftKings salary and $1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Philadelphia Eagles favored by 4.5. So I like Zach Ertz here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, in my week 3 sleeper pick at the tight end position is Austin Hooper from the Cleveland Browns playing the Washington football team, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Austin Hooper, he's only averaged 3.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3 pass targets per game. He's going to be less than 1% owned, but he's on the field for 86% of the snaps. He's only touched the ball 5% of that time. The volume has been low so far, so nobody's going to be on this guy, but he's a talented tight end here. He's projected at 9.2 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $4,400 DraftKings salary and $900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45 points scored in this game, with the Cleveland Browns favored by 7.5. So I do think he gets involved in this game. It's a good matchup, so I like Austin Hooper here versus the Washington football team.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.